The morning sun filtered through the half-open blinds, casting long, uneven stripes across the hardwood floor of Evelyn Harper's new home in California. The air smelled of fresh paint and cardboard, a sharp contrast to the musty familiarity of her old house in New York. At 65, Evelyn moved with a deliberate slowness, her graying hair pulled back loosely, her eyes carrying the weight of years unspoken. She set a box labeled in photos on the dining table, its edges worn from countless moves, each one a futile attempt to outrun the past. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of settling wood, and in that stillness, Evelyn felt the familiar ache rise in her chest, a hollow space where her daughter and husband used to be. She ran her fingers along the tape sealing the box, hesitating. 22 years had passed since that summer, since the camper trip to California that was meant to stitch their fraying family back together. Matthew's voice, rough with frustration, echoed in her mind, arguing over maps and money, while Lola's laughter, bright and fleeting, tried to bridge the gap. Evelyn had clung to those memories, turning them over like stones smoothed by a river, searching for answers that never came. The police had searched. The posters had faded, and still no trace of her 8-year-old daughter or her husband. She'd spent decades chasing shadows, each dead end carving deeper into her soul. With a trembling breath, Evelyn slit the tape and opened the box. Inside were framed photographs, their colors softened by time. She lifted one carefully, a snapshot from Crystal Cove State Park, taken just days before everything changed. Matthew stood with his arm around Lola, both grinning at the camera, the ocean sparkling behind them. Lola's dark blonde hair was tangled from the wind, her blue eyes wide with joy. Evelyn traced her daughter's face, the glass cool under her fingertip, and felt tears prick her eyes. She could almost hear Lola's voice calling, "Oh, Mama, look," as she chased waves, oblivious to the storm brewing between her parents. The front door swung open, breaking the spell. Angela Harper stepped inside, her arms laden with grocery bags, her face softened by a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At 62, Angela carried her own grief, her husband John's death the year before, but she wore it quietly, a steady presence for her older sister. "Evelyn, I brought supplies," she called, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "Thought we could cook tonight, save ourselves from another takeout run while we unpack." Evelyn managed a small smile, setting the photo back in the box. "That's kind of you, Angela. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her voice was soft, tinged with weariness, but there was gratitude there, a lifeline in the sea of change. She'd sold the New York house after years of clinging to it, hoping Lola might one day walk through the door. Moving to California was supposed to be a fresh start, but now, surrounded by unfamiliar walls, Evelyn wasn't so sure. Angela crossed the room, her gaze falling on the open box. "Family photos already?" she asked gently, though her tone held a note of caution. "Maybe start with something easier, Eve. Curtains, maybe? We've got time." She reached out, squeezing Evelyn's shoulder, her touch warm and grounding. Evelyn shook her head, her eyes drifting back to the picture. "So I thought I was ready to let go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But every time I see her face, it's like losing her all over again." She paused, swallowing hard. "Do you ever think maybe she's out there somewhere, Angela? That she's grown up, living a life we'll never know?" Angela's expression tightened, her own memories of Lola, a niece she'd adored, surfacing briefly. "And I think about her too," she admitted. "But we can't live in that, maybe forever." "You've carried this for so long, Eve. This move, it's a chance to breathe." Evelyn nodded, though the words felt distant. She closed the box, sealing the memories away for now. But the weight of them lingered. As Angela moved to the kitchen, unpacking groceries with a soft clatter, Evelyn stood alone, staring at the empty walls of her new home. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope refused to die, a stubborn belief that Lola was more than a memory, that the past wasn't done with her yet. The afternoon light had softened, painting the dining room in hues of gold as Evelyn sat at the table, a pile of unsorted mail spread before her. The move had left her with a jumble of papers, bills, notices, and old letters she hadn't had the heart to open in New York. She sifted through them mechanically, her mind still tethered to the photograph of Lola and Matthew, their smiles frozen in a moment she could never reclaim. Angela was in the kitchen, the clink of dishes and the faint aroma of brewing coffee offering a comforting rhythm to the quiet house. Evelyn's fingers brushed against an envelope buried beneath the stack, its plain white surface unmarked, no stamp or address to betray its origin. She frowned, turning it over, a prickle of unease stirring in her chest. She tore it open carefully, as if it might crumble under her touch, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was uneven, hurried, yet something about it caught her breath, a faint echo of the childish scrawl she'd once helped shape. Her eyes scanned the words and the world seemed to tilt. "Mom, I'm pregnant now. Dad and I are okay, and I hope you're happy with your new family. I still remember Crystal Cove." Clipped to the letter was an ultrasound image, grainy and unmistakable, with the Starlight Medical Center, San Diego, printed in small text at the bottom. A yellowed business card fluttered out, bearing the name of a private investigator she'd hired a decade ago, with a handwritten note. "And found this in old case files. Thought you should see it." Evelyn's hands trembled, the letter slipping slightly as her vision blurred. Crystal Cove. The beach where Lola had laughed, where Matthew had promised a better tomorrow, where everything had unraveled. The mention of it felt like a key turning in a long locked door, but what lay beyond terrified her. Was this really from Lola, her little girl, now a woman expecting a child of her own? Or was it a cruel mistake, a ghost conjured by her endless longing? She clutched the ultrasound, the image of a tiny life anchoring her to the moment, and whispered, It can't be. Evelyn?" Angela's voice cut through, sharp with concern. She stood in the doorway, a mug of coffee in each hand. Her brow creased as she took in her sister's expression. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." She set the mugs down and crossed the room, peering over Evelyn's shoulder at the letter. Her eyes widened as she read, her breath catching. "Oh, Eve, where did this come from?" Evelyn handed her the business card, her voice unsteady. "From the investigator I hired years ago, the one who swore he'd keep looking. He found this, Angela. It's her handwriting, or close to it. And Crystal Cove. How could anyone else know?" She pointed to the ultrasound, her finger tracing the hospital's name. Starlight Medical Center. "It's here, in San Diego, not even an hour away." Angela sat down heavily, her gaze fixed on the letter. "Eve, I don't know what to say. It's incredible, but we have to be careful. After all this time, it could be a mistake. A coincidence. People send things to wrong addresses all the time." Her tone was gentle but firm, tempered by years of watching Evelyn chase false leads only to crash harder each time. Evelyn shook her head, her eyes fierce with a spark Angela hadn't seen in years. "No, not this. Not Crystal Cove. That was our place, Angela. Lola's place. I taught her to skip stones there, right before." Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting the sob that threatened to spill over, "and waited 22 years for a sign, any sign. I can't let this go." Angela reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "I know, Eve. I know how much this means to you. But promise me you'll take it slow. We'll figure it out together, okay? No rushing in alone." Her eyes searched Evelyn's, pleading for caution, but beneath her words lay a flicker of hope, a shared memory of the niece she'd lost too. Evelyn nodded, though her heart raced with a certainty she couldn't explain. The letter lay between them, a fragile bridge to a past she'd never stopped chasing, and for the first time in decades, she felt the stirrings of something dangerous, hope. Darkness had settled over the house, the California night wrapping the windows in a cool, quiet embrace. Evelyn sat at the dining table, the letter and ultrasound still spread before her, their edges curling slightly under the dim glow of a single lamp. The coffee Angela had brought sat untouched, its steam long gone. Across from her, Angela watched with a mix of concern and resignation, her hands folded tightly, as if bracing for what she knew was coming. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the weight of 22 years and a single impossible hope. Evelyn's fingers grazed the ultrasound, her eyes fixed on the tiny shape within it. She could almost imagine Lola, her Lola, grown into a woman, carrying a child of her own. The thought sent a pang through her, sharp and bittersweet. "I'm going to San Diego," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Tomorrow morning, Starlight Medical Center. I need to know, Angela. I need to see for myself." Angela sighed, leaning forward, her gaze searching her sister's face. Eve, I want to believe this as much as you do. But what if it's not her? What if this letter is someone else's story? You've been down this road before. Phone calls, tips, dead ends. I don't want to see you break again. When her words were gentle, but they carried the echo of countless nights spent consoling Evelyn through tears and shattered hopes. Evelyn rose, crossing to a bookshelf where a worn leather notebook rested, its pages thick with years of desperation. She opened it, revealing newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and faded flyers with Lola's smiling face. "'Tis isn't like those times," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. "I've chased shadows, yes, but this feels different. The handwriting, Crystal Cove, the investigator's card. It's too much to be nothing." She held the notebook out, as if its weight could convince Angela of what she felt in her bones. Angela took the notebook, flipping through it slowly. Her eyes softened at a sketch Lola had drawn, a crude sun over a beach, labeled Mama, in childish letters. "'T'okay," she said at last, closing the book with care. "Well, if you're going, I'm coming with you. But we do this together, Eve. No running off alone, no letting hope blind you. Promise me that." Evelyn nodded, relief washing over her. She reached for Angela's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching. "Said I don't know what I'd do without you." For a moment they sat there, bound by shared loss and the fragile possibility of reunion. Outside, a breeze stirred the trees, carrying the faint scent of the ocean, a reminder of the coast where everything had changed, and where perhaps it might change again. As Angela cleared the table, Evelyn tucked the letter and ultrasound into her purse, her resolve hardening. The road ahead was uncertain, paved with questions she might never answer, but for the first time in years, she felt a purpose beyond grief. Tomorrow, she would step into the unknown, chasing the ghost of her daughter's voice and whatever truth awaited her at Starlight Medical Center. The morning sky over San Diego was a pale, endless blue, but Evelyn barely noticed as she drove, her hands tight on the steering wheel, the letter and ultrasound tucked safely in her purse. Beside her, Angela fiddled with the GPS, muttering about unfamiliar roads, her presence a steady anchor against the storm of Evelyn's thoughts. Starlight Medical Center loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the early sun, a beacon of answers or heartbreak. Evelyn parked, her heart pounding as she stepped out, the air sharp with the tang of antiseptic and the distant hum of the city. 22 years of waiting had led her here, to a place that might hold the truth about her daughter, and the weight of that possibility made every step feel like wading through sand. Inside, the hospital buzzed with quiet efficiency, nurses hurrying past with clipboards, visitors murmuring in corners, the soft chime of an elevator breaking the rhythm. Evelyn approached the reception desk, her purse clutched tightly, as if the documents inside might vanish. A young man in scrubs looked up, offering a polite smile. "Oh, good morning, how can I help you?" And his voice was calm, professional, but to Evelyn it felt like a gatekeeper to her past. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm here about an ultrasound," she said, pulling the image from her purse and sliding it across the counter. "It's from your hospital. I need to know about the patient it belongs to." Her words came out firmer than she felt, her eyes searching his face for any hint of recognition. The receptionist studied the ultrasound, his brow furrowing slightly. "And I'm sorry, ma'am, but patient information is confidential. I can confirm this is from our facility, but without a name or authorization, I can't share more." He handed the image back, his expression sympathetic but unyielding. "So, do you have any other details? Maybe a patient's name?" Evelyn's stomach sank, the barrier of bureaucracy looming larger than she'd expected. "I don't know her name," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "But this ultrasound, it might belong to my daughter. She's been missing for a long time," and words felt raw, exposed, and she saw a flicker of compassion in the young man's eyes, though his hands remained still on the keyboard. Angela stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Evelyn's arm. "But maybe there's someone we could talk to," she suggested, her tone measured. "Supervisor, or someone in records? We're not trying to cause trouble, just, we need to understand." Her voice carried a warmth that softened the moment, but the receptionist shook his head. "I wish I could help," he said sincerely, "but our policies are strict. You might try contacting the patient directly if you have any other way to reach them." He paused, glancing at the ultrasound again. This doctor's name, Dr. Teresa Norris, OB-GYN, is listed here. Her office is on the 3rd floor, but you'd need an appointment. Evelyn seized the information like a lifeline, her pulse quickening. Oh, Dr. Norris, she repeated, committing it to memory. Thank you. She turned to Angela, her eyes bright with determination. We'll go to her office. If this doctor saw the patient, she might know something. The thought of being so close to answers, yet blocked by rules, ignited a stubborn resolve she hadn't felt in years. Angela hesitated, her gaze flickering to the busy lobby. Eve, they're not going to just let us walk in. We don't even know if she's really Lola. Her words were cautious, but Evelyn was already moving toward the elevators, her steps purposeful. I'm not leaving until I try, Evelyn said, her voice firm. Once I've waited too long, Angela. If there's even a chance, I have to take it. She pressed the elevator button, the ding echoing like a starting bell. As they stepped inside, Evelyn's eyes swept the lobby one last time, lingering on a woman with dark blonde hair crossing the floor, her back turned. For a fleeting moment she thought of Lola, grown and unfamiliar, but she pushed the image away. Not yet, she told herself. Not until I know. The elevator doors closed, carrying them upward, toward a truth that felt both impossibly close and maddeningly out of reach. Evelyn gripped her purse tighter, the ultrasound a silent promise, and steeled herself for whatever lay beyond the 3rd floor. The examination room at Starlight Medical Center was bathed in soft light, its walls adorned with pastel posters of smiling babies and blooming flowers. Nain Colton sat on the padded table, her hands resting on the swell of her belly, 37 weeks heavy with life. At 30, her dark blonde hair was pulled into a loose braid, and her deep blue eyes held a quiet intensity, as if searching for something just out of reach. Beside her, Caleb, her husband, scrolled through his phone, his steady presence a balm to the unease that had settled in her chest. The hum of the ultrasound machine filled the silence, but Nain's mind was elsewhere, tangled in a past she could only half remember. She shifted, the paper beneath her crinkling, and thought of the letter she'd sent 2 weeks ago. Writing it had felt like reaching into a fog, her pen trembling as she formed the words, "Oh, Mom, I'm pregnant now." She hadn't expected a reply, not really, but the act of sending it had stirred something restless in her, a longing she'd buried long ago. Growing up, she'd written dozens of letters, each one carefully folded and handed to her father, Matthew, who promised to mail them. "Oh, if your mom's moved on, Nain," he'd say, his voice gentle but firm. "She's got a new family now." As a child, she'd believed him, her tears drying into resignation, but lately doubts had crept in, sharp and unyielding. A memory flickered, unbidden. A woman's voice, warm and low, singing a lullaby about stars and seas. Nain closed her eyes, chasing the image, a kitchen bathed in morning light, flour dusting her small hands as she helped shape dough, laughter bubbling up as the woman, her mother, kissed her forehead. "Alola, my little baker," the voice called, and Nain's heart ached at the name she hadn't heard in years. Was it real or just a dream woven from a child's need? She'd found a letter she'd written at 10, hidden in her father's old desk, its edges yellowed but never mailed. That discovery had driven her to write again, to send one last message into the void, hoping against hope for an answer. "Nain?" Caleb's voice pulled her back, his brow furrowed with concern. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "You okay? You've been quiet since we got here." His brown eyes searched hers, steady and kind, the anchor she'd clung to through the uncertainties of pregnancy and the ghosts of her past. She managed a small smile, squeezing his hand. "Just thinking," she said softly. "What about the letter? I keep wondering if I made a mistake sending it. What if she doesn't want to hear from me? Or what if—" She trailed off, the fear too heavy to voice, that her mother had truly abandoned her, that the love she remembered was a lie. Caleb set his phone down, turning to face her fully, and did what felt right, he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You've carried this question your whole life, Nain. If she's out there and she cares, she'll find a way to reach you, and if not, you've got us, me, the baby. You're not alone." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch grounding her, but the doubt lingered, a shadow she couldn't shake. The door opened, and a nurse stepped in, clipboard in hand, her smile brisk. "Mrs. Colton, Dr. Norris will be with you shortly. Just need to check your vitals first." As the nurse wrapped a cuff around Nain's arm, Nain's gaze drifted to her purse, where a small keepsake rested, a tattered cloth doll her mother had sewn, its stitches fraying but still holding. She'd kept it all these years, a silent link to a woman she barely knew, a mother who might never know the daughter she'd become. The cuff tightened, mirroring the pressure in Nain's. She thought of the letter again, its words now adrift in the world, and wondered if they'd reach the woman who sang to her as a child. Part of her hoped they had, but another part feared what that might mean, for her father, for the family she was building. As the nurse jotted down numbers, Nain felt the baby kick, a reminder of the future pulling her forward, even as the past refused to let go. The hospital's third floor was a maze of corridors, each turn marked by signs pointing to places Evelyn had no interest in: radiology, cardiology, pediatrics. She moved with purpose, her purse heavy with the ultrasound and letter, Angela trailing a step behind, her expression a mix of worry and reluctant support. The elevator ride had been silent, the air thick with unspoken fears. But Evelyn's resolve hadn't wavered. Dr. Teresa Norris's office was somewhere ahead, and with it, the chance to find the woman who might be her daughter. The antiseptic scent clung to everything, mingling with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, and Evelyn felt as if she were walking through a dream, every detail sharp yet unreal. They reached a glass door labeled Obstetrics and Gynecology, but a receptionist's brisk voice stopped them before they could enter. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, peering over her glasses, her fingers poised above a keyboard. Evelyn faltered, the weight of another barrier pressing down, but she squared her shoulders, her voice steady. "No, but I need to speak with Dr. Norris. It's about a patient, an ultrasound from her office. It's urgent." The receptionist's eyes narrowed slightly, her tone polite but firm. Sorry, but Dr. Norris is fully booked today. Without an appointment or patient authorization, I can't let you in. You're welcome to call and schedule something for next week." She gestured to a stack of business cards, as if that settled the matter, and turned back to her screen. Evelyn's hands tightened on her purse, frustration bubbling beneath her calm. Next week was an eternity. She needed answers now, before hope slipped through her fingers again. Angela touched her arm, her voice low. "Eve, maybe we should try something else. We're not getting through this way." Her eyes flicked to the busy hallway, where nurses and patients moved in a steady stream, a reminder of the world continuing without them. Evelyn shook her head, unwilling to retreat. "Then there has to be another way," she murmured, her gaze sweeping the corridor. A sign caught her eye: "Lost and Found, room 312. And a memory stirred, faint but insistent. Lola had loved a handkerchief Evelyn had embroidered with a looping intel, carrying it everywhere until the day they'd left for Crystal Cove. It was a long shot, but long shots were all she had left. "Oh, let's try there," she said, already moving, Angela hurrying to keep up. The Lost and Found was a small office tucked at the end of the hall, its shelves lined with forgotten jackets, umbrellas, and bags. A middle-aged attendant looked up from a ledger, his smile tired but kind. "Looking for something specific?" he asked, setting his pen down. Evelyn hesitated, then spoke, her voice softer now, as if afraid to hope. "And a handkerchief, maybe, embroidered with an L. It would have been left recently by a patient of Dr. Norris's, I think." The attendant nodded, turning to a bin labeled and recent items. He rummaged briefly, then pulled out a folded square of fabric, its edges frayed but unmistakable. A delicate L curled in blue thread across one corner, faded but intact, and Evelyn's breath caught, her knees weakening. That's it," she whispered, reaching for it, her fingers trembling as they traced the stitches she'd sewn 22 years ago. "Lola's." Angela's eyes widened, her skepticism faltering. "Eve, are you sure?" she asked, but Evelyn was already turning to the attendant, her voice urgent. "Who left this? Was it a woman, about 30, blonde hair? Please, I need to know." The attendant checked his ledger, frowning slightly. "It was logged a week ago, picked up by a Nain Colton after a visit with Dr. Norris. That's all I've got." He paused, sensing Evelyn's intensity. "And I can't give out more without permission, but if it's yours, you can take it." Evelyn clutched the handkerchief, its weight impossibly light for the memories it carried. Nain Colton. The name meant nothing, yet everything. She looked at Angela, her eyes blazing with certainty. "It's her," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It has to be." Before Angela could respond, Evelyn turned back to the attendant, an idea forming. "Can I leave a note for her, for Nain, in case she comes back?" The attendant nodded, handing her a slip of paper and a pen. Evelyn's hand shook as she wrote, her words simple but heavy. "Oh Lola, I never stopped looking for you. I'm here, Mom." She folded it tightly, pressing it into the attendant's hand. "Please, make sure she gets this," she said, her voice breaking. As they left the office, the handkerchief still in her grip, Evelyn felt a spark ignite, a fragile, dangerous hope that this Nain Colton might be the daughter she'd lost, and that the past was finally reaching back. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Starlight Medical Center, casting long shadows across the polished floor, as Nain Colton stepped out of Dr. Norris's office. Her hand rested on her belly, the baby's gentle kicks a quiet reassurance after another routine checkup. Caleb walked beside her, carrying her purse, his easy chatter about dinner plans fading into the background as Nain's thoughts drifted. The letter she'd sent 2 weeks ago lingered in her mind, its unanswered weight heavier with each passing day. She wondered if it had reached her mother, or if, as her father had always said, Evelyn Harper had truly closed that chapter of her life. As they approached the elevator, a nurse hurried toward them, her clipboard clutched tightly. "Mrs. Colton?" she called, her voice bright but urgent. Nain turned, startled, her pulse quickening at the unfamiliar tone. "I'm glad I caught you," the nurse continued, holding out a folded slip of paper. "Someone left this for you at the Lost and Found. They said it was important." She smiled, oblivious to the way Nain's breath caught, and handed over the note before disappearing back into the bustle of the hospital. Nain stared at the paper, its edges creased, her fingers hesitating as if it might burn. Caleb raised an eyebrow, leaning closer. "What's that?" he asked, his curiosity tempered by concern. "Something from the doctor?" Nain shook her head, unfolding the note with trembling hands. The words hit her like a wave. "Oh, Lola, I never stopped looking for you. I'm here, Mom." The handwriting was neat but shaky, each letter carrying a desperation that pierced her heart. Lola, a name she hadn't heard since childhood, a name tied to memories she'd buried deep. Her knees weakened, and she gripped Caleb's arm, the hospital corridor blurring around her. "It's her," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And my mother." The note slipped slightly, and she caught it, pressing it to her chest as if it might vanish. She thought of the cloth doll in her purse, its stitches a fragile link to the woman who'd signed this note. A memory surfaced, vivid and raw, a beach at dusk, her mother's hands guiding hers to skip stones, her laughter mingling with the crash of waves. "Oh, Lola, you're a natural," she'd said, and Nain, Lola then, had felt safe, loved, whole. Caleb guided her to a nearby bench, his hand steady on her back. "Nain, talk to me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "What does it mean? How could she know you're here?" He took the note, reading it quickly, his brow furrowing. This is huge, but are you sure it's real, after all this time?" Nain's eyes darted to the paper, her mind racing. "It's her handwriting," she said, certainty battling doubt. "So I found an old letter I wrote as a kid, one Dad never sent. The way she loops her L's, it's the same," and she pulled the doll from her purse, its faded fabric soft under her fingers, and held it tightly. "She called me Lola. No one else does that, Caleb. Not even Dad." The realization brought a flood of questions, each one sharper than the last. Why now? Why here? And what had her father kept from her? She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed Matthew's number. The call connected after 2 rings, his familiar voice warm but cautious. "Nain? Everything okay with the baby?" he asked, and she could picture him in his small apartment, surrounded by the clutter of a life rebuilt. "Oh, Dad," she said, her voice tight. "I got a note today. From Mom. She says she never stopped looking for me." The words spilled out, raw and accusing, and she heard his sharp intake of breath, a silence that spoke louder than any answer. "And you told me she left us, Dad, that she didn't want me. Was that true?" Her voice broke, tears welling as the hospital's hum faded into nothing. Matthew's paws stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. "Oh, Nain, honey, it's complicated," he began, his tone strained. "We should talk in person. Where are you?" But Nain shook her head, though he couldn't see, her grip tightening on the phone. No, Dad. I need to know now." Her voice rose, drawing a glance from a passing nurse. "Did you lie to me?" The question hung between them, a chasm she wasn't sure she wanted to cross. Caleb squeezed her hand, his eyes steady, giving her strength to wait for an answer that might unravel everything she'd ever known. The small cafe near Starlight Medical Center hummed with the gentle clatter of cups and murmured conversations, its windows fogged from the morning chill. Evelyn sat at a corner table, her hands wrapped around an untouched mug of tea, the steam curling upward like a fragile hope. Across from her, Angela fidgeted with a napkin, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds, as if bracing for a storm. They'd received a call from the hospital's lost and found late the previous night. A woman named Nain Colton wanted to meet, prompted by the note Evelyn had left. The words, "Oh Lola, I never stopped looking for you," had reached their mark, and now Evelyn's heart thudded with a mix of dread and longing, each tick of the clock pulling her closer to a truth she'd chased for 22 years. The door chimed, and Evelyn's breath caught as a woman stepped inside, her dark blonde hair catching the light, her posture tense but graceful. She was 30, perhaps, her features sharpened by time yet achingly familiar, the curve of her jaw, the deep blue of her eyes, the faint dimple that flickered when she scanned the room. Evelyn stood, her chair scraping softly, and for a moment the world narrowed to this stranger who might be her daughter. "Nain?" she said, her voice trembling, the name foreign on her tongue. The woman's gaze locked onto hers and she nodded, her expression guarded. "You're Evelyn?" she asked, her voice low, carrying a trace of an accent smoothed by years away from New York. She approached the table, hesitating before sitting, her hands clasped tightly in her lap.
"Oh, I got your note."
You called me Lola." The word hung between them, a bridge and a barrier, and Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes, the weight of that name a lifeline she'd never let go. "And I'm your mother," Evelyn said, the words spilling out before she could stop them, raw and unpolished. "Oh Lola, Nain. I've been looking for you since the day you disappeared. I never stopped." Her voice broke, and she reached out, then pulled back, afraid to shatter the fragile moment. Angela placed a hand on her arm, a silent reminder to breathe, but Evelyn's eyes stayed fixed on Nain, searching for a spark of recognition. Nain's face tightened, her fingers twisting together. "If you were looking, why didn't you answer my letters?" she asked, her tone sharp with years of buried hurt. "And I wrote to you, dozens of times when I was a kid. Dad said you didn't want me, that you'd started a new family. Was that true?" And her eyes bored into Evelyn's demanding answers, and the accusation cut deeper than any blade. Evelyn shook her head, her throat constricting. "No," she said, her voice fierce despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "And I never got any letters, Nain. I never knew you were writing. I lived alone, every day hoping you'd come back. Your room, it's still there, in New York, exactly as you left it." She leaned forward, her hands trembling on the table. "When Father took you that summer, at Crystal Cove, he and you walked down the beach, and you never came back. I searched, police, flyers, investigators. I never stopped loving you." Nain's breath hitched, her eyes flickering with doubt and something softer, something like memory. "Crystal Cove," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "And I remember the stones. You taught me to skip them." She paused, her gaze dropping to her hands where a faint scar crossed one knuckle, a mark from a fall Evelyn had bandaged long ago. "And Dad said you left us. He said you didn't want to see me anymore." Angela leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Oh, sweetheart, your mom's telling the truth. She's carried this pain for 22 years. Whatever your father told you, it wasn't the whole story." Her words were steady, a counterpoint to Evelyn's raw emotion, and Nain looked at her, recognition dawning. "Aunt Angela?" Nain said, her voice small as if reaching for a memory. "He used to make me pancakes, with funny faces." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away, her composure fraying. "And I don't understand. Why would Dad lie? He's the only family I've had." Evelyn's heart ached at the confusion in Nain's eyes, the betrayal beginning to take root. "I don't know why," she admitted, her voice thick. "But I'm here now, and I want to know you, Nain, you and your baby. I've missed so much, but I don't want to miss any more." And she reached out again, this time letting her hand rest on the table, an invitation rather than a demand. Nain stared at the hand, her own still clenched, torn between the mother she'd longed for and the father she'd trusted. The cafe's hum faded, leaving only the truth hanging between them, sharp and unfinished, a wound that would need time to heal. The hospital corridor outside Dr. Norris's office was a blur of motion, nurses weaving through with carts, patients shuffling past. But for Evelyn, time had slowed to a crawl since the cafe meeting that morning. She sat on a bench, her hands clasped tightly, the handkerchief with its embroidered enamel tucked in her purse like a talisman. Nain had agreed to meet again, this time at the hospital for another checkup, and Evelyn had insisted on coming, Angela at her side, both tethered to the fragile thread of reunion. The memory of Nain's tear-streaked face, her hesitant "and I remember the stones," played on a loop in Evelyn's mind, each word a step closer to her daughter, yet shadowed by the question of Matthew's lies. Angela shifted beside her, her voice low. "She's coming around, Eve, but it's a lot for her. Give her time." Her eyes were soft with empathy, but Evelyn could only nod, her gaze fixed on the hallway where Nain would soon appear. The truth had begun to surface, but it was jagged, cutting them all, and Evelyn braced herself for what might come next. She hadn't seen Matthew in 22 years, hadn't known if he was alive, but Nain's words, "Dad said you left us," had stirred a quiet dread, a sense that he was closer than she'd imagined. A commotion at the end of the corridor snapped her attention. A man burst through the double doors, his graying hair disheveled, his face etched with panic. "Nain!" he called, his voice hoarse, and Evelyn froze, recognition hitting like a blow. Matthew, older, worn but unmistakably him, scanned the hall, his eyes wild until they landed on her. For a moment neither moved, the air between them thick with 2 decades of silence, betrayal, and unanswered questions. "Evelyn," he breathed, his voice barely audible, his steps faltering as he approached. How did you find us?" Before she could answer, Nain emerged from the exam room, Caleb at her side, her face paling as she saw her father and mother together. "Und Dad?" she said, her voice trembling, and the corridor seemed to shrink, trapping them in a moment that could shatter everything. Evelyn stood, her heart pounding, anger and grief surging in equal measure. "So, took her," she said, her voice low but fierce, each word a blade. "When you took my daughter and told her I didn't want her. Why, Matthew? Why did you do this to us?" Her hands shook, but she held his gaze, refusing, even as his crumpled under the weight of her accusation. Nain stepped forward, her eyes darting between them, her hand protectively over her belly. "And Dad, I asked you on the phone. You didn't answer. Did you lie to me about Mom? About everything?" A voice cracked, the hurt raw and unguarded, and Evelyn saw the little girl she'd lost, now a woman demanding the truth. Matthew's shoulders sagged, his face a mask of torment. "Nain, I was trying to protect you," he said, his words halting. "When Mother and we were falling apart. I thought I'd lose you in a divorce, that she'd get custody. I couldn't bear it." He turned to Evelyn, his eyes pleading. "So planned to tell you years ago, but you were so young, Nain. You cried for her, and I made up a story to stop the pain." Evelyn's breath caught, disbelief warring with rage. "A story?" she said, her voice rising. "Was you stole her life from me. You stole mine. And the letters. Nain said she wrote to me. Where are they, Matthew?" Her hands clenched, the handkerchief's memory burning in her mind, a symbol of all she'd been denied. Matthew flinched, his voice barely a whisper. "And I kept them," he admitted, his gaze dropping. "Every one. I told her I mailed them, but I was afraid you'd find us, Evelyn. I'm sorry." The confession hung heavy. A wound laid bare, and Nain gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Won't you lied to me my whole life," she said, her voice breaking, and she turned to Caleb, who wrapped an arm around her, his jaw tight. "Won't, how could you do that, Dad?" The betrayal in her eyes was a mirror of Evelyn's own, and for a moment mother and daughter were united in their pain. Matthew reached out, his hand trembling, but Nain recoiled, and something in him snapped. "So I did it for you," he shouted, his voice echoing down the hall. "So don't understand, Nain. I had to keep you safe." He turned to Evelyn, his face contorted with desperation, and before anyone could react, he shoved her hard against the bench. Evelyn stumbled, pain flaring in her shoulder as she caught herself, Angela rushing to her side with a cry of alarm. Nurses turned, a security guard moving swiftly toward them, but Evelyn's eyes stayed on Matthew, her voice steady despite the shock.
"You can't run from this anymore," she said, her words cutting through the chaos.
Not from her, not from me. Matthew's face crumpled, regret flooding his features. But the damage was done, the truth a fire consuming them all. The hospital corridor pulsed with tension, the echo of Matthew's shout still lingering as security guards closed in, their radios crackling with urgency. Evelyn steadied herself against the bench, her shoulder throbbing where she'd hit it, but her eyes burned with a resolve that drowned out the pain. Matthew stood a few feet away, his hands raised in surrender, his face a mask of regret and desperation as the guards flanked him. Nain clung to Caleb, her tears silent but heavy, her gaze fixed on her father with a mix of betrayal and sorrow. Angela hovered beside Evelyn, her hand gripping her sister's arm, her voice a low murmur of reassurance amidst the chaos. "Sir, you need to calm down," one guard said, his tone firm but measured, his hand resting on his radio. Matthew's eyes darted to Nain, pleading, but she turned away, her shoulders shaking as Caleb whispered something soft, grounding her. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "And I want him arrested," she said, her words cutting through the noise. "Ain pushed me, but that's not all. He took my daughter, our daughter, for 22 years. He lied to her, kept her from me. He needs to face what he's done." The guards exchanged a glance, one nodding as he spoke into his radio, requesting police assistance. Matthew's face crumpled, his voice hoarse. "Evelyn, please," he said, his hands dropping to his sides. "I know I was wrong, but don't do this, not in front of her." He looked at Nain, his eyes brimming with tears. "Nain, I'm sorry. I just wanted to keep you with me. Let me see your baby, just once, before—" Nain's head snapped up, her voice sharp despite her tears. "No," she said, her words like a wall slamming down. "You don't get to ask that, Dad. Not after everything." "I don't want you near my child. Not now, maybe not ever." And her hand rested on her belly, protective, and Evelyn felt a surge of pride and pain, seeing her daughter's strength forged in the fire of betrayal. Matthew staggered back as if her words had struck him, and the guards tightened their grip, guiding him toward the exit. "I love you, Nain," he called, his voice breaking, but she didn't look back, her face buried against Caleb's shoulder. Evelyn watched him go, a part of her aching for the man she'd once loved, but the larger part, the mother who'd lost everything, stood firm. "It's over, Matthew," she said softly, more to herself than to him, as the doors swung shut behind him. Angela squeezed Evelyn's hand, her eyes glistening. "I did the right thing, Eve," she whispered, but Evelyn could only nod, her throat tight with the weight of justice and loss. Nain lifted her head, meeting Evelyn's gaze, and for a moment the corridor's chaos faded, leaving only the unspoken bond between them, fragile, wounded, but unbroken. The maternity ward of Starlight Medical Center was a world apart from the chaos of the corridor hours earlier, its walls painted in soothing blues, the air thick with the quiet anticipation of new life. Evelyn sat in a plastic chair outside the delivery room, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened, the ache in her shoulder a dull reminder of Matthew's outburst. Beside her, Angela flipped through a magazine without reading, her foot tapping a nervous rhythm against the linoleum floor. The hospital's hum had softened to a hush, broken only by the occasional murmur of nurses or the distant cry of a newborn, each sound pulling Evelyn's heart in two directions, toward the daughter she'd found and the granddaughter she had yet to meet. Inside the delivery room, Nain gripped Caleb's hand, her breath coming in sharp gasps as contractions tightened their hold. The events of the day, her father's lies, her mother's tearful truth, had pushed her body to its limits, triggering early labor at 37 weeks. Dr. Norris's voice was steady, guiding her through the pain, but Nain's mind flickered between fear and determination, her thoughts anchored by the life she carried. She saw her mother's face in the cafe, heard the crack in her voice saying, "I never stopped loving you," and clung to that promise as fiercely as she clung to Caleb. "And you're doing great, honey," he whispered, his eyes bright with pride and worry, and Nain nodded, summoning strength she hadn't known she had. Evelyn's gaze drifted to the closed door, her mind replaying every moment of the past 24 hours. The letter, the handkerchief, Nain's trembling voice asking why. She thought of Lola at 8, her small hand clutching that same handkerchief, her laughter echoing across Crystal Cove. The memory was a wound and a gift, and now, with Nain so close, Evelyn felt the weight of all she'd missed. First steps, school plays, heartbreaks. Yet the possibility of what lay ahead stirred something new, something like hope. "See, she's strong," she murmured, more to herself than to Angela. "She's always been strong." Angela set the magazine aside, her hand finding Evelyn's. One like her mother, she said softly, her smile tinged with sadness. And so you've both been through so much, Eve. This baby, it's a chance to start again, for all of you. Her words were a balm, but Evelyn's eyes stayed. On the door, her heart racing with each muffled sound from within, praying for Nain's safety, for a miracle she scarcely dared to name. Time stretched, minutes blending into an eternity, until the door finally swung open, and Caleb stepped out, his face flushed with exhaustion and joy. "It's a girl," he said, his voice breaking into a grin. "Taint's okay, and the baby's perfect. They're both perfect." Evelyn stood, tears spilling freely, and Angela pulled her into a tight embrace, laughter mixing with sobs. "Can we see them?" Evelyn asked, her voice thick, and Caleb nodded, leading them inside. The room was bathed in soft light, Nain propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat but her eyes glowing with a love Evelyn recognized, the fierce, boundless love of a mother. In her arms lay a tiny bundle, wrapped in a pink blanket, her face scrunched and serene. "Oh, Mom," Nain said, her voice hoarse but warm. "Aunt Angela, meet Hope." She lifted the baby slightly, and Evelyn's breath caught, seeing traces of Lola in the curve of Hope's cheek. A legacy unbroken by years apart. Evelyn moved closer, her hands trembling as she reached out, pausing to meet Nain's gaze. "She's beautiful," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "And just like you were." Nain smiled, a flicker of trust in her eyes, though shadows lingered. Questions unanswered, wounds still raw. "I'm glad you're here," Nain said, her voice catching. "But I need time, Mom, for all of this." Evelyn nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude for this moment, fragile as it was, and for the tiny life named Hope, who carried the promise of healing in her small, perfect hands. The hospital room was a cocoon of soft light and quiet sounds, the hum of monitors blending with the gentle rustle of Nain's blanket as she shifted to cradle Hope closer. Morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the bed where Nain sat, her face pale but serene, her dark blonde hair loose around her shoulders. Evelyn perched on a chair beside her, her hands folded in her lap, the weight of the past day settling like dust after a storm. Hope slept in Nain's arms, her tiny chest rising and falling, a fragile bridge between mother and daughter, each moment in her presence a gift Evelyn hadn't dared to dream of. Nain's eyes lingered on Hope, but her voice broke the silence, tentative yet searching. "Oh, Mom," she said, the words still unfamiliar. "And you really look for me? All those years?" Her gaze flicked up, meeting Evelyn's, and the question carried a weight of doubt and hope, a child's longing wrapped in a woman's caution. Evelyn's throat tightened, memories flooding back, nights spent scouring missing persons reports, days pasting flyers on lampposts, her voice hoarse from calling Lola's name. "Every day," she said, her voice steady despite the ache. "After you and your father didn't come back from the beach, I waited at the camper thinking it was a mistake. Hours turned to days, then weeks. I went to the police, hired investigators, followed every lead, no matter how small." She paused, her fingers tracing the edge of her sleeve, grounding herself. "He kept your room the same, Nain. Your drawings, your books. I couldn't let them go, because letting go felt like giving up on you." Nain's eyes glistened, her fingers tightening around Hope. "I used to dream about you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "That song you sang about stars over the ocean. I'd wake up thinking you were there, but Dad said you weren't coming back. He said you had a new life, new kids." She shook her head, the betrayal still raw. "Ain't I believed him, Mom. I stopped writing after a while because it hurt too much." Evelyn leaned forward, her heart breaking at the image of her daughter waiting for letters that never came. "I never knew about your letters," she said, her voice thick with tears. "If I had, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you. I lived alone, Nain, no new family, no one else. Just me, holding on to you." She reached into her purse, pulling out the handkerchief with its faded L and held it out. "This was yours. I found it here, at the hospital. It's how I knew you were close." Nain took the handkerchief, her fingers brushing the stitches, a flicker of recognition in her eyes.
"I lost this," she murmured. "Or I thought I did."
"Dad gave me a new one, but it wasn't the same." She looked up, her voice stronger now. "What happens now? With Dad, with us? I'm so angry, but he's still my father, and I don't know how to be your daughter again." Evelyn swallowed hard, the honesty of Nain's words both a wound and a promise. "And don't expect you to know." she said gently. We've got time, sweetheart. Your father, he'll face what he did in court for taking you for the lies. It won't be easy, but I'll be here, every step, if you'll let me. She paused, her eyes on hope. And for her, too. I want to be the mother I couldn't be, and maybe a grandmother she'll love. Nain nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek as she looked at Hope. I want that, she said, her voice catching. And that it's going to take time. I need to figure out who I am now with all this. She met Evelyn's gaze, a fragile trust taking root. Thank you, for not giving up. Evelyn smiled through her tears, reaching out to touch Nain's hand, the handkerchief between them. Never, she whispered, and in that touch, she felt the first threads of healing, delicate but real, weaving them back together. Twilight settled over Starlight Medical Center, the sky outside Nain's hospital room a deep indigo, pierced by the first stars. Nain sat propped against pillows, Hope cradled in a bassinet beside her, the baby's soft breaths a quiet rhythm in the stillness. Caleb lounged in a chair, his tie loosened, his face softened by exhaustion and love, as he watched his wife and daughter. The chaos of the day, her father's confession, her mother's tears, had retreated, leaving Nain in a fragile calm, her thoughts swirling with truths she was only beginning to grasp. She reached for the cloth doll tucked in her purse, its frayed stitches familiar under her fingers, and held it tightly, as if it could anchor her to the mother she was rediscovering. Caleb, she said, her voice low, I keep thinking about what Dad did. All those years he let me believe she didn't care. I feel angry but also lost, like I don't know who I am anymore. Her eyes glistened, the weight of betrayal heavy in the dim light. Caleb leaned forward, his hand finding hers, warm and steady. Sure, Nain, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Sure, the woman who wrote that letter, who faced the truth even when it hurt. And you're Hope's mom now. None of what he did changes that. His thumb brushed her knuckles, grounding her, and she managed a small smile, though tears slipped down her cheeks. I want to be better for her, Nain said, glancing at Hope, her tiny face serene in sleep. Once I grew up with lies, Caleb. I thought my mom abandoned me, and it shaped everything. How I trusted, how I loved. I don't want that for Hope. When she's old enough, I'll tell her everything. About Mom, about Dad, about why I'm Nain and not Lola. Her voice grew stronger, a vow forged in the pain of the past. Sid deserves the truth, no matter how hard it is. Caleb nodded, his eyes bright with pride. You'll be an amazing mom, he said, squeezing her hand. And you're not doing this alone. You've got me, and now you've got your mom, too. She's not going anywhere. I saw the way she looked at you, at Hope. It's real. He paused, his smile widening. And Angela, she's already planning to spoil that kid rotten. Nain laughed softly, the sound to release, and leaned her head back, the doll still in her grip. She thought of Evelyn's hand reaching out, of the handkerchief that had survived years apart, and felt a flicker of possibility, a future where truth could build rather than break. Son, I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, but I want to try, for Hope, for me. As Caleb kissed her forehead, Nain closed her eyes, the stars beyond the window a quiet promise that even in darkness, light could still be found. A week had passed since Hope's birth, and Evelyn's California home felt alive in a way it hadn't before, its empty corners softened by the promise of family. The morning sun spilled through the living room windows, dusting the hardwood with golden light, as Evelyn moved with quiet purpose, arranging a small guest room for Nain and Hope. She smoothed a quilt over the bed, its patchwork pattern one she'd sewn years ago for Lola, each stitch a prayer for her return, now would cradle her daughter and granddaughter, a tangible link between past and future, and the thought brought a lump to Evelyn's throat, a mix of gratitude and lingering sorrow. She paused to hang 2 frames on the wall, one holding the old photo from Crystal Cove, Lola's smile bright against the sea, and another, new, of Hope in Nain's arms, her tiny face a mirror of her mother's. The contrast was stark, years stolen by lies, yet Evelyn felt a quiet strength in placing them side by side, a refusal to let loss define what was to come. Her fingers lingered on the new frame, tracing Hope's cheek, and she whispered, "We're together now," as if the words could mend the fractures left by 22 years. The doorbell chimed, and Evelyn found Angela on the porch, a knitted baby blanket draped over her arm, its soft blues a gift woven with care. "For my great niece," Angela said, her smile warm but shadowed by the weight of recent days. She stepped inside, setting the blanket on the couch, and glanced at the guest room. "You're nesting, Eve. It's a good sign." Her voice held a teasing lilt, but her eyes searched Evelyn's, checking for cracks in her sister's resolve. Evelyn managed a laugh, leading Angela to the kitchen where coffee brewed, its aroma grounding the moment. "I need to keep busy," she admitted, pouring 2 mugs. "Nain's coming tomorrow, just for a few weeks while she sorts things out. I want her to feel safe here." She paused, her gaze drifting to a letter on the counter, its legal letterhead stark against the wood. "It's a lawyer called this morning. Matthews confessed to the kidnapping, the fraud. He'll likely face years in prison." Angela sipped her coffee, her expression tightening. "It's what he deserves," she said, though her tone carried a trace of pity. "Oh, but it's not easy, is it? For you, for Nain." She reached across the table, her hand covering Evelyn's. "And you're doing right by her, Eve, giving her space to heal. And you're not alone in this. I'm here, ready to babysit Hope or cook bad pancakes, whatever you need." Evelyn squeezed her sister's hand, tears pricking her eyes. "Oh, you've always been my rock," she said, her voice thick. "So I don't know how I'd face this without you." The words held years of shared grief, Lola's loss, John's death, and a promise to carry on together. As they spoke, the front door opened, and Nain stepped in, Hope nestled in a carrier, her eyes tired but bright with a tentative warmth. "Mom," Nain said, her voice soft, "it looks like home." She glanced at the quilt, the photos, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face, memories stirring beneath the surface. Evelyn crossed the room, her heart swelling, and helped Nain settle Hope, their hands brushing briefly. A touch that spoke of trust slowly rebuilt. They sat together, Angela joining them, and the room filled with quiet laughter as Nain described Hope's first week, her tiny quirks already a story of their own. Evelyn listened, drinking in her daughter's voice, and felt the weight of the past ease, not gone but lighter, carried by the love that bound them now. The letter on the counter remained, a reminder of trials ahead, but for this moment, Evelyn held on to the family she'd fought for, knowing they'd face whatever came as one. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, painting Evelyn's backyard in hues of pink and gold, a quiet symphony of light that stirred the leaves outside her California home. She stood on the porch, a shawl draped over her shoulders, her breath visible in the cool morning air. Inside, Nain and Hope slept, their presence a warmth that filled the house, softening its edges with life. Evelyn's eyes traced the silhouette of her daughter through the window, Hope cradled close, and a tide of gratitude rose in her chest, tempered by the scars of years apart. She held her old leather notebook, its pages worn from decades of searching, each entry a testament to a mother's refusal to let go. 22 years, countless nights of fear, fleeting hopes, and empty answers, had led to this moment, fragile yet real. Evelyn opened the book, her pen steady as she wrote, "Lola came home. She's Nain now, and we have hope. The road ahead is long, but we're together." The words felt like a vow, a marker of the journey's end and a new beginning, etched in ink as indelible as her love. The sun climbed higher, its light catching the dew on the grass, and Evelyn thought of Crystal Cove, of laughter, lost and found. The pain of Matthew's betrayal lingered, a shadow that would follow them to court, but it no longer held her captive. Nain's tentative trust, Hope's tiny hands, these were her anchors now, proof that love could endure even the darkest nights. As the dawn broke fully, Evelyn closed the notebook, her heart steady, and stepped back inside, ready to face whatever came with her family by her side.